Hi, welcome, 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 welcome. We are going to have a treat today. We have our own Cal State folks, Andre Harrington and Kathyrn Ervin from Theater Arts. So expect a lot of drama today. Uh, we we want to highlight a different take on policing, criminal justice through the arts. How have we been socialized to believe in a certain way about policing, and much of this comes through media. So we're very excited. I need to acknowledge though that we're that Cal State University sits on the territory and ancestral land of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians. We recognize that every member of Cal State University San Bernardino community has benefited and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1965. Consistent with our values of community and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold Cal State University San Bernardino more accountable to the needs of American Indian and Indigenous peoples. And having said that, with that, I'll turn you over to Professor Kathyrn Ervin from Theater Arts.
Well, hello and welcome. And I'm going to turn you over to my esteemed colleague, Andre Harrington, who's going to provide a little introduction.
Good afternoon. My name is Andre Harrington. I'm a professor of theater arts at CSUSB. The past few weeks have been a difficult time for many. To relive the horrific murder of George Floyd via countless televised, streaming, and recorded platforms continue to fuel the trauma experienced by many. I have been asked on many occasions to participate in this series of conversations regarding policing and brutality. I declined. I do not feel that I can speak to the best advantage that serves these conversations. I am an artist, not a scientist, psychologist, sociologist, or anthropologist. Yet, all of these areas influence my work as an artist. Professor Ervin and I have had many conversations as to how we were to approach today's conversation, a conversation from the lens of Black films and television and Black performances. I grappled with this notion for hours on end, wondering what in the world would I be able to contribute. During one conversation with Professor Ervin, it became apparent, and bear with me here, I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my shit, right? Erykah Badu, okay. During one conversation with Professor Ervin, it became apparent that my fear for joining this series is because I recognized early on as a child, I've had difficulty in understanding the nature of aggression, the use of violence, and the mixed messages I received as a child. Growing up in Northeast and Southeast Washington, D.C. in the late 60s and early 70s was a magical time for me, from my perspective. I enjoyed the love of my mother and extended family, played with my cousins every weekend, and got my scalp greased by Mima every Saturday night while watching Carol Burnett. In 1972, my second grade class viewed a civil rights clip supporting images of marches, Dr. King's speech, and the beautiful spectrum of the Black folks that I am aligned to. In one clip, we witnessed police officers with German Shepherd dogs barking aggressively while on a leash and protesters being taken down with water hoses plugged into the nearest water hydrant. I had nightmares from watching those images. Fast forward to the third grade, our class received a visit from Officer Friendly, the community-based police officer assigned to come to our school and inform us of what police do. Well, RA knew what they did. By the time I was in the fourth grade, we had a babysitter, Miss Davis. She was a local woman caregiver for the 6-block circumference of my neighborhood where we attended River Terrace Elementary School. After school, we would come to Miss Davis's and have a snack, play a board game, and oftentimes watch TV. At 4 p.m., Mod Squad reruns would appear in black and white in front of me in the living room. The notion of a trio of undercover police officers, one white, Michael Cole, one white female, Peggy Lipton, and one black male, Clarence Williams III, was a sharp contrast to what I had internalized from those civil rights clips. My mother picked us up around 4:45 p.m., so I never got to see the end of the show to find out the fate of the bad guys or even the outcomes of the officers. This, coupled with the blaxploitation films, police dramas again solidified a level of confusion for me. Because when we would get home and after dinner and prepping for bed, around 8 p.m. or so, my mother would often watch television of various police detective shows, Starsky and Hutch, Hawaii Five-0, Policewoman, etc., mostly with a cast of white actors. There was no Shamar Moore, S. Apatha Murkison, or Idris Elba for me to hear in the background. The subtle noises of the television police dramas, coupled with the real-life noises of cars, sirens, and bangs, serenaded me to sleep. This notion of being entertained by violence, aggression, and the role of the police, coupled with my previous ingrained notions of police brutality attacking people who looked like me, created a path of distrust, confusion, ignorance, and withdrawal, to say the least. Fast forward, I'm here before you today to introduce to you Professor Kathyrn Ervin from the Theater Arts Department. Our hope is to create and navigate a conversation framed with the ideas of perception, intent, and impact that may give us another lens to examine images of policing and investigation as presented in Black films and television. Thank you. Professor Ervin?
Thank you, colleague. That was wonderful. Thank you for sharing your story. It's so important. So thank you, members of the conversation on race and policing, for extending the invitation. Like Andre, I struggled with what I might bring to this conversation because it's a lot, and I've been pleased to see the variety of perspectives that have been included. But I thought today I would take a little bit of a different take, as you know I do, and we're going to remix it a little bit. Because one of the things that seems to be, there was a previous conversation around ideas and images presented in the media regarding policing. I am not necessarily the scholar of media studies, but one who has an interest in the area. So let me, in the interest of full disclosure, say that. So this is not an attempt to be scientific, but as my colleague has suggested, this is to provide a lens through which we might look at some things. I've long been intrigued with Black film and television, have taught the Black film course. Some of my students may be here today, and I apologize because you may hear some repeats. But I think it's important that we look now today, especially, at what has been the presentation from the Black film perspective of law enforcement. We certainly see enough in the media. Here is what policing looks like. Here's what criminals, et cetera, look like. What does the Black community have to say about law enforcement and individuals who are police, specifically kind of detectives, is where I found most of my research. I'll look at a little bit of television, a little bit of film. We'll be looking primarily at trailers and short clips because we'd be here all day looking at movies. And this is a curated collection. I selected these things. So if something is missing, absolutely you can charge it to my, what do we say? You can charge it to my head and not to my heart. Because that's how it shakes out. And in the interest of full disclosure, I have family members who are law enforcement, who have served in police departments, primarily in St. Louis, Missouri, and in Detroit, Michigan. No longer serving, all retired. So that surely shapes some of my perceptions as well. And I want to thank my colleague, Thin, who is going to be playing the PowerPoint for me. So Thin, let's go. So the pride of lions, because many of, especially the Black officers that I know, have exuded a great deal of pride and bring that to the community. And there are subtle perceptions that inform that. Next slide, please. So my cultural interest is in, as a member of the Black audience, Andre gave me that wonderful introduction. What is there for me to digest that will be fuel, that will help me as a person confronting a number of conflicting situations as I move through life? Any mainstream presentation, television, film, radio, is limited by access and exposure. By that I mean who has access to present, produce, put stuff out, and who is exposed to it, who can watch, see, get, etc. Right? So this presentation is, I did not deal with anything that was a cable or subscription service when I get to the television piece, because more recently, everyone has access to television. That wasn't always true. There once upon a time, there were only a few people in the neighborhood who had a television. All right. And a belief that Black Americans have always had an interest in truth and justice, whether or not we were able to receive it. We have always had an interest in truth and justice, whether or not we thought we were going to receive it. Isn't that interesting? I want you to hold on to that thought. An attempt to build an awareness of the images, you are what you eat. And so I'm hoping through this presentation to help you become a little more mindful about what is being served. Let's put it that way, shall we? Next slide, please. So a couple of things in my analysis on your left screen. These are sort of the big ideas that we always wrestle with in terms of theatrical and film presentations. Plot, what are the events that happen? Characters, who has the agency? And thought, what are the themes? Our interest today is not so much in plot, because a lot of police drama, action drama is driven by car chases, explosions, etc., the action of events. I'm interested in the characters. Who are the people that we are being presented with? What ideas about the people are being constructed? And then, along with that, most of you will know W.E.B. Du Bois, the great social architect, writer, sociologist. His criteria for Black art was and is that it should be by, for, about, and near. It should be by Black artists, for a Black audience, about Black subject matter, near Black people. Those were the criteria that he set, and those criteria are still are impactful not only in the Black arts, but in many other arts. We look at the arts of women, the Latino community, Asian art, and we say, is this created by, is it created for, is it created about, is it created near, right? So kind of hold on to those. However, comma, in a previous conversation, it was pointed out that Black artists frequently don't have access to the means. So that gets to that next little arrow there. Even without the access or the agency, African Americans have always provided a covert message. Yes, this is what the producer said they wanted. Yes, this is, but as soon as you, and Andre will co-sign on this with me, I'm sure, as soon as you put a Black artist in the picture, that artist is going to bring themselves to the work throughout history, right? So even though the producer, the composer may have said, well, this is the view, in fact, I have, the Black artist immediately is going to say, how can I speak to the audience of people that knows me in a way that they will get the message? So we're looking at the overt message and the covert message, right? All right, next slide, please. All right, so we have been believers. The earliest Black films, among the earliest Black films, Oscar Micheaux, you may have heard that name. His films include elements of law enforcement in that something happens, a individual has done something wrong, and the characters have to uncover what happened. these films tend to be interested in the social impacts that lead to criminal behavior or the environments that create crime, that the criminals are victims of a larger society. But we don't directly see Black law enforcement. We see law enforcement macro, law enforcement writ large. Does that make sense? Right? Post World War II, something interesting starts to happen as filmmaking becomes more mainstream, as the studios begin to make films realizing that there is a Black audience, as Black filmmakers, and there are a few, have access to better materials, etc. Different start of films, different kinds of films begin to come up. And these films are, in my opinion, are focused on the idea that the truth can somehow be found, that there is a truth out there and it can be identified if the individuals who are doing the identifying will give themselves over to that task. So I have two clips here. The first one is 1948 Miracle in Harlem. It's a film about a young woman who runs a, don't start the clip yet, who she and her family run a candy store, a rich magnate, and all of the characters in the film are Black. The rich man, the poor man, the community, everyone in the film is Black. It's a white film director, and it's a studio that is producing both Black and white films. And the candy store is taken over by this rich magnate. He dies, and they try to, the young woman you see here in this picture is blamed for his murder. So, you know, there's a whole accusation. And the three Black police officers then are charged to find out what happened. Now, if you go and look for this film on YouTube, the clips that will come up, interestingly enough, feature Stepin Fetchit. Stepin Fetchit is a minor clown character. He plays, you know, the second servant of the servant to the people working in this candy store. But he, because of his fame in this period, 1948, Stepin Fetchit was a big star, gets, you know, some substantial billing, and his clips get saved. What I want to share with you right now is a clip that happens late in the film. The murder has happened, the young woman's been arrested, her fiance, you will see Stepin Fetchit, his character name is Swifty because he's so slow. Ha, ha, it's a joke. Okay. Swifty goes to the police with some information and is immediately followed by the young woman's fiance, who comes to bring them some more information. And we're just going to watch a little clip. So if you could go ahead and play that clip for us.
Oh. Faith in him is our only hope.
But there's nothing left.
We're going to advance a little bit.
I've heard it.
Right.
I usually ain't.
What do you want here?
There you go.
Wait for Mr. I have to have a fork for everything I eat. If I can't fork it, I can just don't bother with it myself.
What kind of work do you do in the candy kitchen?
I do feet work. I use my feet. Yes.
Use your head and answer me sensibly.
Yes, that was Aunt Harry sent me here to bring you something. You see, she said you ain't supposed to go around the neighborhood with it. I ain't supposed to know it. And
what are you so nervous about?
I ain't exactly nervous. I just get mixed up. Oh yes, and you take it while I am looking. Then I ain't seen that it was brought, and you ain't heard it after you know it. Nothing in there.
You can go now.
I ain't arrested.
Now, run along.
You mean limp along with my feet. But you visiting her too?
What are you doing here?
Just have something I'm supposed to forget. Something you want me to tell Aunt Hattie?
No, you just run along, Swifty. This is Bert Harlem, Julie Weston's sweetheart. Have a seat. Thank you, sir. I came to tell you what I know of the case, although I'm not sure it will have any bearing. I like that pin you're wearing. Distinguished Service Medal, sir. I was with the 110th Battalion attached to a chemical warfare unit. I see. Now, what do you have to tell me? Well, several times a man came to see Jim Marshall. Once in particular, Jim seemed extremely upset. Do you know this man? No, but I heard his name. It was Manley. Boys, we've got places to go. There's something I want Manley to hear.
We'll get the old grapevine going.
Okay, thank you. So what they've done there is they've set a trap to capture the criminals now. What's important to notice? Well, you have Stepin Fetchit there, misbehaving badly, using his broken language. He's supposed to bring a note. He's got this whole long explanation. He's afraid of the police. The police have frightened him. The police in this case are black. There are 3 black officers. You noticed that, right? 2 of them wearing that very standard 1940s fedora, the sergeant sitting behind the desk. But you also had, in contrast to Stepin Fetchit, you had William Graves, the young man, who is clear and articulate, is a veteran. I like that pin you're wearing, says the sergeant, recognizes who the young man is, confirms that when he says, I like that pin, well, sir, I served with the da-da-da, and then proceeds to give the specific information that's going to lead the detectives to find the real killer, which they're going to do in a little subplotty moment. And they use the community to get the information out. So a black detective, here's my deduction, and maybe I'm wrong, a black detective understands who people are, recognizes individuals by their signifiers, by the pin in the case of the young man, knows the tools that they have access to in the community. Boys, get the grapevine going, send out the information that they want to send out, and then are able to use it to capture the real perpetrators of the crime. That's what we see in that film. This film is considered a very fine film, number one, because the characters are so overwhelmingly good. It's 1948, right? They're good people. But not only that, but also because of the quality of the film itself. By 1948, black and white films are being made a little differently. Okay, so we have that first example, a variety of images included in this film. I should also point out the bad guy, the rich magnate who takes over the little candy store, is a black millionaire. His secretary, his vice president is a woman. His son is a chemist who's trying to steal the formula. And these are all black characters, right? So in this world, good and evil are both represented by black characters. The way the crime is solved, the old lady in the film pretends to be dead, and the criminal goes to get an ink pen that was used in the murder, and she is not dead, and of course wakes up and scares him and so forth. Okay, moving right along. It's charming. Okay, let's go to the next one. Intruder in the Dust, 1949. This is MGM Studios. MGM, a major studio. This is a beautiful film, not nearly as well known in the United States, actually very well known overseas, received several international prizes. And this is about a crime that happens in Mississippi. The character you see here, who will be following, you'll learn a little more about him in the trailer, is accused of murder when a man is found dead on his property. He's a black landowner in a white Mississippi town who is independent, steadfast, strong-minded, self-willed. So of course he gets accused of the crime. And the story, based on the novel by William Faulkner, the great American writer, Pulitzer Prize-winning writer, this story follows how he is brought in, and it's clear to us that something terrible is going to happen to him unless it is proven that he was not guilty of the murder, right? And his detectives are not Black, but are very interesting. So let's watch this trailer. It's a couple of minutes long. A motion picture must.
I was not ready for that.
You
Okay.
were not ready for that one?
No, I
should have had a
wasn't.
disclaimer at the beginning. There's going to be some language. Okay, sorry. 1949. What I think is interesting here is the people responsible for the solution of the crime are the Black man himself, Juano Hernandez. And I hope you noticed in the filming how much of the screen he absorbs. So he is not a small, diminutive Black man in the corner. He is not Stepin Fetchit that we just saw. He is certainly not William Graves, the fiance that we saw. Here is a dignified, steadfast, land-owning, proud. You see in the clip, they try to hit him with the thing and people are shoving him out the way, right? That he's a very unique kind of Black man, and as a result gets accused of this crime. A couple of interesting things in the backstory of this. They filmed this in Mississippi, and the residents of the town are playing the angry lynch mob. Okay, I know, right? I want to be in the movies. I want to be in a lynch mob.
Is that called realism? Is that just called realism?
I don't know about that. So it was filmed with town members. In the end, he is proven innocent by the little old lady and the little boy are the two people who uncovered the truth. So the idea, one of the things that I've been thinking about it, particularly in terms of these two films, is the idea of the innocent, the one who's sort of without stain, if as it were, you know what I mean, is the individual who can help bring that truth forward. We have that kind of idyllic, maybe is not the word that I want, notion of law enforcement and how the truth gets uncovered. Remember, this is 1949. This is post World War II. Soldiers had come back, had served. Many of them in the military, had worked on the GI Bill, were able to, we're reaching for that American dream, etc. Okay, all right. Okay, now it's going to get a little sketchy McSketcherson, as we like to say. Next slide, please. So the 1960s, oh, here we go, civil rights and beyond. The importance of Black law enforcement to now get to the truth. This idea of a Black police officer comes forward or a Black detective comes forward into the 60s as, here's the guy who's going to be able to really get to the truth, because the rest of you all don't know what you're doing. Okay, so this kind of new Black policing figure, and you'll see some examples here. There is also the uplifting of the role of the community in investigating and uncovering. That the community, the Black community, remember I said at the beginning, has an interest in stopping crime. And so in many of these films, we see them supporting the Black police officer, providing information to the Black police officer in a way that they don't necessarily support white law enforcement. I mean, that's a generalization, but all right. We also have the introduction of Black writers and filmmakers now for the major studios. So we're going to look at a couple of different kind of film examples. So next slide, please. Of course, we have to look at a clip of In the Heat of the Night. Uh-oh, Mary smiling. She knows it. 1967. Woo! This is a film that was made with an all-star cast. Again, MGM. So they're trying to put some ideas on the table. Interesting depictions of racism. Racism is right out front. The mob is right out front. It's very clear from the beginning of the film. Sidney Poitier is a Black detective from the North who comes to the South and is involved in the solving of this case. He is a strong Black presence with agency. He don't take no stuff. There's a scene in the film. Well, I'll talk about that in a minute. I'll talk about that after you've seen the clip. And this picture won an Oscar for Best Picture. Rod Steiger, the white police officer, won the acting award. Sidney Poitier did not. Many people thought he had been robbed, but we're not going to talk about that. Okay, let's look at the clip for The Heat of the Night.
On your feet, boy. I mean now. Got a name, boy? Virgil Tips. Virgil. Where you come from? There ain't no trains this time of morning. I could have had you shot. Skulls caved in. Could have been a hitchhiker. Okay, I got him.
Where's my husband?
I thought I told you to get the hell out of here.
You aren't taking me anywhere, you dig?
You gonna get yourself killed. I'm a police officer.
Look, they pay you $162.39 a week just to look at bodies. Why can't you look at this one?
Why can't you look at it for yourself?
I do not want that Negro officer taken off this case.
I'll need a few things, such as ammonium hydrosulfide, benzidine, superoxide of hydrogen, copper powder, distilled water, calipers, and some toothpicks.
Why won't anybody here tell me what's happened to him?
Are you sure you're pregnant?
Yes, I am pregnant.
I can pull that fat cat down.
I'm afraid you're a little late, Virgil. We already got the guilty man.
May I examine this prisoner?
Yeah, you can look at him. Come on, let him look.
He's left-handed, isn't he?
What's that make him?
Innocent.
I got the motive, which is money, and the body, which is dead.
You're holding the wrong man.
But don't you push me, boy.
They call me Mr. Tibbs.
What kind of people are you?
Look in her purse. She's got $100 to pay for an abortion. In the heat of the night, seems like a cold sweat creeping across my thigh. In the heat of the night.
Okay, I know, right? Woo! You remember that one? There's
Oh,
a
yeah.
fabulous scene in the this is the movie where he says, "They call me
Mr.
Mr. Tibbs." Okay, don't mess around with my name. Obviously, someone who has agency, presence, knows what he's doing. I love that little clip there where he says, "I need some sulfur dioxide, copper diamond," and you know the all these Southern cats are like, "What? What is he asking for?" So he's smart. He knows what he's up against. They obviously, the rest of the police force has very little faith in his ability to be able to come to any kind of conclusion. He's an uppity black boy from North. They're trying to get rid of him, and of course he solves the whole thing. There's the one scene in the clip you saw where the one of the female protagonists says, "I don't want that Negro officer off the case. He's the only one working." There's also a great scene in the movie where one of the more bigoted citizens of the town smacks him, and he smacks him back. This was like, you know, in the movie theaters, everybody went up for grabs when that happened, at least in the black theaters. So a very interesting kind of depiction now. Black law enforcement is not only in charge in the North, but is somebody who can bring the truth to the South, right? Somebody who can come into these communities that seem to be doing things in a very old boy kind of way and can bring a fresh perspective. Wow, all right. I should also point out Sidney Poitier has been badly labeled as an actor who was fading, who was always playing the nice guy roles. This is a little later in his career. Many of those roles, keep in mind the opportunities for Black actors, that he was cast in those roles. He, did wonderful work in them, but frequently was sort of the sort of individual who's stalwart and, chin up and I'm going to get through it. And here we see him fighting back against very clearly opposing racism in a way that he hadn't been able to do in some of his earlier films. He goes on, of course, to become producer, director, etc., on several other major kind of film projects. All right, a year later, let's go to the next one. I hope you brought your popcorn because this just, don't start the clip yet. This is Cotton Comes to Harlem, 1970. So Portier, you notice, was the suit and tie cop, right? This is what a detective wears. We also saw that in Miracle in Harlem, this idea of the suit and tie cops who are clean and keen, I'll say, for lack of a better describer. 1970, this film presents detectives, law enforcement, from a Black writer. Chester Himes wrote a series of novels about crime in Harlem, featuring his two cops, Coffin Ed Johnson and Gravedigger Jones are the two characters. The film is made by Ossie Davis, a very important figure in film, theater, an important figure in the civil rights movement. He and his wife Ruby Dee were activists in the movement starting as early as the 30s and 40s when they begin their career in numbers of films, but this is one of Ossie's earliest films. It features Black actors. Sidney Poitier is well known. He has moved beyond the tier of only being seen in sort of Black art films and is seen in mainstream films, right? Here we're going to be introduced to some Black actors who are better known to the Black community. Black actors that are popular from smaller films, lesser known films, right? Godfrey Cambridge and Raymond St. Jacques are the two principals, but there are several other members of the community. Red Fox is in the film, several others. And what happens in this film that's interesting, among many other things, as we watch this trailer, I want you to watch how the cops behave, and I want you to listen carefully to the kind of language that they use, because these cops are code switching, using the stereotypes, are clearly grounding themselves in a Black folk, and I mean by folk, community tradition as law enforcement, compared to Portier, who's operating inside of this superstructure or this power structure that he is the Black sort of conforming and going beyond. Here we're going to meet the Black in the Black community cops, right? The film was followed up with Come Back Charleston Blue, also written by Chester Himes. So here's the trailer for Cotton Comes to Harlem, 1970.
Introducing two cops only a mother could love. Meet Coffin Ed Johnson and Gravedigger Jones, two of New York's finest. Two cops who take charge when an $87,000 bale of cotton comes to Harlem.
Tell me something, will you? What's a bale of cotton doing in Harlem?
A bale of cotton?
Bale of cotton.
No, what would a bale of cotton be doing in Harlem?
Down south, cotton was king. Cotton Comes to Harlem. It's cops and robbers with a shade of difference.
See any cotton around here lately? A bale of cotton, sure. Where is it now?
Did you turn Japanese, huh? Come on, you know the position. Come on.
Damn it.
Another fine mess you got us into.
I got us into. Shut up and shoot.
Godfrey Cambridge is Gravedigger Jones. Raymond St. Jacques is Coffin Ed Johnson. Calvin Lockhart.
Well, if it ain't King Kong and Frankenstein.
Hey, what kind of talk is that, soul brother? Don't you know that black is beautiful?
They put a personal touch on everything they handle.
You have to play with that thing.
I'm insecure, Captain.
They're big, they're cool, They're beautiful.
Where is that bale of cotton?
There ain't no such thing as a bale of cotton in Harlem.
Is that black enough for you?
I finally found that bale of cotton. One thing's for sure, it ain't drugstore cotton.
This is genuine Mississippi cotton. Don't you know if cotton come to Harlem? Come on, let's boot cotton's bud. Let's boot this bud. I said if cotton come to Harlem, I think I'm gonna get me a stick and I'm gonna kick cotton in the butt.
Coffin Ed Johnson and Gravedigger Jones, two cops only a mother could love.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, I hope you took note of all of the mockery of the Black tradition that's inside a Black film by Black filmmakers, by a Black writer, making fun of what's been said about the Black community to the point where they run the truck into the watermelons. I mean, come on now, right? So what they're doing is they're exploding the ideas of, in an action film, there always has to be the scene where they crash into the fruit cart or they crash into the something, a truck of watermelons. It's a Black film. This idea of cotton being in Harlem, cotton, get it? Cotton comes Harlem. There's $1 million stashed inside this bale of cotton, which is why they're looking for it. Only a mother could love, a mother in italics, right? So playing with the idea of language, the idea of stereotypes of what a Black cop is supposed to be, and yet we learn that they're tough, that they're respected. They throw they're not the Black Panthers, but they're the Nationalist brothers that you see in sort of the uniform in that one scene where he throws the guy up into the air. You see them there in the background in this piece of the trailer, that they understand who are the real individuals who are for the Black community and who's pretending to be for the Black community. They can see the difference, that these soul brothers are not really soul brothers. They're really out to get something, to take advantage of the community. And that's an important idea that in the Black community, the Black detective recognizes is not going to be taken in by someone pretending to be ultra Black or on the side of the Black community, that those ideas are not going to have the same agency. All right. Moving right along, let's go to the next clip. Go ahead. Yep. Thank you. All right, and yeah, play the sound for us, please. Oh, we can't hear the sound. Oh, who's oh, don't play the clip yet. Who's the cat that won't cop out when there's danger all about? Who is the man who would risk his neck for brother man? He's a complicated man. No one understands him but his woman.
Why aren't you singing that? Because
you're going to hear
something if you don't sing it.
Because I want you to look at the lyrics.
That costs extra. That costs extra, Dr. Mary. That's extra.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
So who's the cat that won't cop out? Right? Here is a detective who is not going to back down. A man who would risk his neck for brother man. The Black policeman is with the Black community. A complicated man, but no one understands him but his woman. And here is where we get a presentation of law enforcement that visually goes against the grain. I pointed out that Coffin Ed in Cotton Comes to Harlem, their suit and tie, blue shirt, raggedy kind of suit. They're obviously not as neat as Sydney in the white suit and tie. Certainly William Graves in Miracle in Harlem, white shirt. Here we get a different visual presentation of Black law enforcement. And I think that there's going to be something to that. Isaac Hayes won an Oscar for the score to this film. Let's go ahead and play we had to bring in the cute clip from YouTube. Yeah, if we can. Because it's restricted, it's not for all audiences.
Get out of the way. Cat say he gonna be here, he should be here. Open it up.
Shaft's his name. Shaft's his game.
Cat say he gonna be here. And he ain't.
Woo.
It ain't right. Oh. Wait. That's some cold shit. Throwing my man Leroy out the window. Just picked my man up and threw him out the goddamn window. Listen, Snow White. Me and you gonna tangle sooner or later.
Why don't you stop playing with yourself, Willie? You ain't gonna do shit.
Shaft's his name. Shaft's his game.
Hey, man, I don't know no Ben Buford.
20.
Oh, that Ben Buford.
We're gonna take it out of your ass, pimp.
I'm looking for a nigga named John Shaft.
Just found him. Wop.
The mob wanted Harlem back. They got Shaft up to here.
All I'm asking you is to let me know what's going on. No names, no places, just what?
Okay, Tom, used up your minute. Get out. Don't Tom me, man. Where the gun?
Look here.
I'll be goddamn.
Yeah. Come on, in front of me. You want to play your super heavy black number? I'm going to play mine. We can nail your tail for manslaughter on what we got on you right now.
Right on.
What is it? When you lead that revolution, why they better be standing still? But you don't run with a down no more. We're done running, man.
Shaft. Hotter than Bond, cooler than Bullet. Rated R. If you want to see Shaft, ask your mama.
Okay, thank you. There's your mother again. You have to ask your mother if you want to see Shaft. You can go to the next slide, please. Oh,
I'm looking for
Shaft.
Who's asking?
okay, stop that.
Your son.
Oh, a film so successful it was recently remade. Okay, so in Shaft we meet 1971. Gordon Parks, black director, not Gordon Parks' finest work. This is a commercial film. Here's a detective with agency and clearly operating outside of the rules. We see many times there that his sergeant wants to tell me what's going on. Shaft is like, you don't get to know until I'm done, right? So he's the man who would risk his neck for brother man. This is all about Shaft trying to solve a murder. The mob boss asks him to hires him to solve the murder because it's all inside the mob and only Shaft can figure that out. But this idea now that a black detective has style, is stylish looking. In that period in 1970 when that film came out, everybody had a leather coat. Everybody had a turtleneck. Andre D1.
And they all had a sky. Everyone had a sky.
Well, it was a sky now. You mean a tall hairdo? What do you mean by that?
A nice fly hat.
Okay, so that so this image, this idea of what law enforcement and agency leaks over into the cultural context, right? We should also mention that language, because notice that how part of the R rating was because of the use of language in the film. That's part of what's being promoted. That's part of the image that's going on. All right. Whew, hold on now. Hold your horses. We're getting there. This is 1984. This is a soldier story. A crime film set in the military. And this is a setting that we typically don't think about law enforcement within the ranks of the military, but crime happens, you know, if you watch NCIS or any of those, you know that crime happens there, right? This is 1984. This is adapted from a stage play. The stage play was amazing, Pulitzer Prize winning play, and the author of the play wrote the screenplay, wrote the script, adapted the script for film, right? And it featured many performers out of the Negro Ensemble Company. So let me unpack that a little bit. Up to now, we've been watching film actors performing in Black films. In this film, Black actors who come with all of the unique training that is part of what happens in the theater move into the silver screen, and that actually is going to make some opportunities later on down the road. Denzel Washington is in the film, Howard Rollins, Adolph Caesar, Larry Riley, and others are in this film, right? So a sergeant is killed, and a investigating military police officer from the North is sent down to investigate the crime. That's basically the story. Let's watch this clip. Wow. Now, if you don't know the story, you don't know much, do you? I mean, that's a really interesting trailer compared to Shaft, where we know he throws people out of windows, and right. We could see what Shaft's going to be able to do. This is very much presented as mysterious from the very beginning. It's just typeface, typeface, typeface. Finally, the face of Howard Rollins, the investigating officer, against the boys in the barracks. We see him ride by there, right? And he's going to come to investigate this crime. Of course, they don't believe he's a ranking military police officer. Similar challenge to In the Heat of the Night, right? That idea that, oh, you're a Black guy, you can't really be in charge. And yet he is, and yet, in fact, he solves the crime. The other thing that's interesting in this one is here we have the depiction of a Black police officer, a high-ranking officer. Adolph Caesar is the officer who's been killed, who has prejudice against his fellow Black officers. Says he doesn't like shiftless and lazy ones, is mad because they're from the South and are not as educated, and in many ways takes out his frustrations about race in general on the Black men who are under his command. So it's a really interesting depiction of the issues of race, the issues of enforcement, because the white senior officers who are supposed to be in charge are unequipped to handle the problem of this kind of race on race consciousness, if that makes sense, right? All right, the moment you've been waiting for. Let's go to the next one. Oh, I know you've been waiting on this. Yeah, okay, sit down. 2018, and this is a jump from Soldier Story was back there in 1984, so I just leaped 30 years. Because this is a very recent film. Again, law enforcement presentation by Spike Lee. You know, we could do a whole seminar on Spike Lee, and maybe someday I will get around to that. Spike Lee is a director who's taken on numbers of issues in the Black community, returning veterans, veterans in the war, Do the Right Thing, which is a whole expose. If you haven't seen it, well, shame on you. I'm going to be like Shaft, ask your mother if you can see Do the Right Thing. Spike Lee directs the film. Jordan Peele, Black American up-and-coming filmmaker, director, is one of the producers on the film. And this is based on a true incident. A Black Colorado officer who, what's the word I'm looking for, goes undercover, thank you, to investigate the Klan, hence the title Black KKK. And the film underscores partnership and ingenuity. Okay, at least that's one of the things that's a theme in this film. So let's take a look at this clip. Okay, if I had known this was a Klan meeting, well, I wouldn't have taken this gig. Wow, if you haven't seen this one, it's hard to watch. because it gives you such a I'll say such a clear view of the perspectives of the Black Power movement and the Klansmen, and for my money, and I'm with you, Andre. I'm one of those people that grew up when we were bombarded with those images. There is a lot in there that is a very difficult reminder of what those confrontations were like, and the constant reminder through the film of the danger that both of they call themselves the Stallworth brothers because they're both playing the same character. Remember, I started this off saying this was going to be about Black character. Here is a Black character who puts on a white character, hello, reverse minstrelsy, to infiltrate the Klan to find out what they're planning against the Black community. It's really, such an interesting thing. And the white officer who has to impersonate the character that the Black officer has created is Jewish. So he has to literally go into the Klan, join the Klan, participate in the planning meetings as part of this undercover operation. So the whole film just does a great job of unpacking and introducing all of those ideas and how difficult they are. In addition to that, on a more personal note, Spike Lee's filming of the Black people is just extraordinary. The images of these Black women with you see the kind of Angela Davis woman with the very large afro and the round glasses, and his loving portrayal of those faces of those young people who are attending and want to get involved and are protesting, etc. It's just breathtakingly beautiful, which helps to underscore the danger and hazards that this supremacist point of view presents when we see them, so beautifully rendered, and we also see the ugliness so clearly rendered as well. It's a wonderful contrast. The other thing that I was going to say about this film is it really reveals the horror in supremacy and terrorism and those ideas. He does a really fine job. Oh, I know what it was. In the film, Harry Belafonte plays an elder civil rights figure. He doesn't play himself, but he plays a known figure in the civil rights movement who comes to the town to speak to the Black population. And we the audience, get to see the Harry Belafonte again, a major figure in the civil rights movement, marched with King, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, sit in a chair and talk to a group of young people about how horrific and terrible that those moments were. So it's well worth the time invested in seeing the film. And yes, I have a Spike Lee crush. Okay, I admitted it there. Okay, now. So I hope that unpacks some of the ideas in film, but not everybody goes to see these films. So now I want to spend a little bit of time. Let's go to the next slide, please. And we're going to see what's happening on television. And keep in mind that television comes into our homes. Let me say that one more time. Now movies come into our home now because we are at home, right? But television is in our homes. And so there's a very different kind of dynamic there. Andre, you were unpacking that when we were talking at the beginning about this idea that it's in the background, it's very influential. And surely I have colleagues here as part of this presentation who may want to be more specific. I'm just going to introduce a few ideas with the hope that others will come forward who may want to unpack a little more. So let's go to the next clip. And because Andre started, the Mod Squad from 1968 to 1973. This was a revolutionary television program. One Black, one white one blonde, dun, 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 dun. So of course the studio is appealing to a wide audience. The blonde is a woman. Wow. So you got a white man, you got a black man, you got a white woman. Who's not going to watch this? And they're teenagers. They've all been recruited to go undercover and solve crimes. So now undercover policing is really cool. So let's look. These are television clips that you might have seen, like a commercial introduction to the thing. Go ahead and play the clip, please. Then the police officer who is he's their parole officer. All of them have done something to become law enforcement. They're in fact law enforcement because they're working off it's part of their parole arrangement. Clarence Williams III, Link, has gotten into trouble because he was a participant in the Watts riot. And that is how he has been invited to join this elite squad that's going to go undercover and investigate crimes that otherwise, I guess, adult policemen couldn't investigate. We need some young people, so you all are going to go do that. He was a protester who had been arrested. The series had many topical themes: young women in battering situations, protest marches, gang involvement, and how people were trying to get into the gang or out of the gang or what the gang was doing. And then some not so very, less topical kinds of things. But you see, it's very popular. 68 to 73, that's 5 years this series ran. And one of the other things that's interesting is the amount of language. And again, this depiction of the cool cops, right? The turtleneck, the little sporty jacket, everybody's wearing that. Everybody's wearing what Peggy Lipton is wearing. They are changing the visual image of what a police officer looks like. He's got the afro going on. His phrase was solid. Everything was solid. Solid, right? And that becomes part of popular English. Solid. And that becomes part of the linguistic tradition of the community. So again, the idea that, policing can be done. It can be done by people who are familiar with the environment. Except for Peggy Lipton the young man was a rich man.
Right.
Peggy Lipton, I can't remember how she got to be a part of the Mod Squad. But their backgrounds are going to help inform them as law enforcement and their ability to mix in, to mingle in. Okay, let's go on, shall we? Next slide, please. So we followed that up. And again, this is a curated list. So I didn't, I couldn't pick everything. I had to be a little bit selective. Hill Street Blues, 1981 to 1987. Some of you may remember that series. Again, another long-running series, 6 years. Follows the lives of the cops on the Hill Street beat. And the cops were, everything. There's a gritty little grungy sort of guy who looks rather homeless, who is in fact a cop. There's an Asian officer. Several women are represented, Black, Latino, et cetera, right? So it's a working look at and this is a little clip from an episode, and I'm going to stop it before it gets too graphic. Okay, so go ahead and play the clip. So just a little squinch of something there. You probably noticed that the white cop is a country guy. He's got a bolo on. At the beginning of the episode, he's been making a point about his new pointy-toed cowboy boots that he's wearing for the first time. Their car gets stolen. And notice that the Black officer recognizes the danger that they're in. Be cool, man. We ain't got no radio. We ain't got no car. You need to calm down. It's the Black officer who understands the circumstances. It's the Black officer who recognizes these two shady characters that are sort of following them. You see what I'm saying? So the agency, again, in the Black character, Michael Warren was one of the lead characters in this particular series. He's the Black officer that we're watching in this scene. Now, towards the end of Hill Street Blues, it got a little soapy and sudsy, but okay, that's just my interpretation. Let's go to the next. They were following the love story more than the crime. Let's go to...
and by the way, Kathy, Michael Warren, just a little bit of trivia, is is a former fellow basketball player who played at UCLA with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You remember him, Stan?
Yeah, I do. He was, yeah, he went from basketball to
acting.
To
Yeah,
acting.
and
did
I
well.
think he's still acting. Yeah.
He still shows up frequently on larger drama, now playing the judge, the senior elder statesman kind of role. But he was quite the dashing fellow.
He really was. And he's got a completely bald head now too. And with all that big old afro, so he goes from that to, yeah.
Well, you know. Let's go to the next clip. We're going on. I told you I had, way too much Law and Order. Wow. Whoosh. Now this is 10 years of Law and Order, but you know that there's Law and Order SVU. Sorry, I always say it that way. Another kind of cop drama, right? Cop stories that has actually sent out has spawned several other Law and Order spin-offs, right? Mm-hmm. So a very long-running series, award-winning actors, Emmy Awards, Tony Awards, etc., especially for the Black performers. And Andre, you mentioned in your opening remarks, S. Epatha Murkison, who is one of the first models for the female chief. And Black women, I think, now, like I said, I'm not a very good researcher in this area, but according to what I've looked at so far, is one of the first women to play the police chief. And she is a Black police chief and played that role for 9 years on the series or something like that. And, that is still the role associated with her. This is a really short clip, a little intro that will just give you a little feature of some of the players in that series. You can go ahead and play the clip, please. Thank you. Created by Dick Wolf. All right. So thank you. Important to note, not only was Law and Order is one of the longest running series, and it's one of those things that's on TV in the barbershop all the time, and almost anywhere you go, you're gonna have Law and Order. But I think one of the other thing that's interesting is Jesse Martin, who you saw in that clip, is a singer. Jesse Martin was in the original production of Rent. So he went from being a theatrical singing performer into Law and Order and had a very long career there. Jerry Orbach, another Broadway singer-dancer who came into the series and had a long-running career. Dennis Farina had been playing criminals, comes into Law and Order and becomes law enforcement. The actor from Blackish, I can't think of his name now. Anthony.
Anthony.
Anthony, you know Anthony, yeah.
You know Anthony.
Anderson.
You know Anthony.
Is an officer in Law and Order. This show was so popular that among performers, and when I say among performers, I mean A-list performers, people who were doing films and other things, if you could get on an episode of Law and Order as the mama, as the janitor, as the guy running you wanted that role because of the exposure that the show got. It was just that popular. It's incredible. Most interesting now, if Hill Street Blues introduced us to this kind of quirky cops, every one of the cops on that show is in some way idiosyncratic. They're the country western guy, they're the macho guy, they all have their own little quirks. Law and Order is straightforward in its sort of presentation of the law and its presentation of the order, of what's going to happen after the crime has been committed and the arrest. And in going to trial, we were exposed to Black judges. We saw Black jurors. We saw Black prosecutors, sometimes, not on the good side, but on the bad side. So there was a very even-handed presentation there. We saw Asian criminals. We saw Asian lawyers. So Law and Order sort of opens up the spectrum of who is involved in the system. Now, that's not to say that they're not picking the most sensational crimes or demonstrating the most, outrageous applications of the law, because it's a TV show, that's what they get paid for. But they're their sense of introducing a different kind of community and building an awareness of that community. Jerry Orbach's character was a former alcoholic. And so that was part of his character, was the fact that he was still following his 12 steps, etc. Right? So the idea now, by the time we get to Law and Order, and there are other shows like this, that police officers come from a community, that may be an ethnic community, that may be a community of individuals who share some kind of system, like the 12-step Alcoholic Anonymous type group, who are connected to families. There's an episode of Law and Order where Ipetha, I can't think of the captain she plays, shoots a young man who tries to rob her with her children in the car. So the idea now that law enforcement are people, that they have families, that they have lives that are coming into play, even as they're being charged with crimes, as they're having to make decisions, sometimes about, you know, people who are in their community. But I know that guy, he runs the bodega on the corner. He couldn't be the numbers, you know what I mean? So those kinds of issues start to come up. Okay, let's go to the next one. Woo! And I'm going to leave you a little time for some conversation. Okay, you thought I had a fan crush on Spike Lee? Wait a minute. Let's talk about Queen Latifah. Okay, this is The Equalizer, a series. This is a current series. It comes on Sunday nights. I'm not saying you should watch it, but it is Sunday night. Okay. Based on the initial series starred Edward Woodard, who is a Brit who sort of solved problems when the police couldn't solve them. And that was the first incarnation of The Equalizer. Then it was a movie with Denzel. Some of you may have seen that. And now it is back with Queen Latifah as the Equalizer. So let's watch the clip and then I'll talk a little more about it. Oh my goodness. All right. Remember, it's television. It's fictional. Okay, let's keep that in mind. However, she is the lead. I believe she's one of the co-producers on the series, right? So here is a Black woman police department, Black woman investigator. She's a private investigator who's from the CIA. She left the CIA because they wouldn't do things on her terms. So she got out of there. And they are trying to get her back because she's just that good. Okay, all right. I know my friends who are saying, wow, she's like a superhero. Yeah, she kind of is. She's independent of everyone. She operates with the police department. She has met a Black police chief who is sometimes trying to solve the same crimes. And so she leaves clues for him. She calls him. You know, they have now met face to face, and he knows she's operating outside the law, but he also understands that she can get things done that he can't get done because he's inside the law. So the importance of again, that idea of a figure who understands the community, knows how to operate in the community. Frequently in the 3 episodes we've seen so far, she makes her way into places because she is a Black woman, and therefore she is not therefore she is not suspect. So she picks up a clipboard and says, I'm here to inspect the pipes. They let her in, right? So that idea of the masking, of that covert way she can behave because she is a Black woman. She's smart and skilled. Her team, the 3 that you sort of see there in the clip, the Asian woman is the muscle, is the marksman, detonations expert, and the white man is a computer hacker who never comes out of the lair, basement, wherever they are hiding. She has a daughter who's a teenager who doesn't understand why mom can't be there, why mom can't attend events, and she struggles with because she can't explain who she is, right? I'm a outside the law operative. No, you can't tell your daughter that. So she struggles with how she's going to explain herself to her family. So she says, she's working as a fundraiser for an overseas agency. So she gets calls at odd times and she has to answer them. Helping her raise her daughter is Lorraine Toussaint, a wonderful actress, who's this sort of artistic, smart homemaking, yoga, candles person who's keeping the home fires burning while Queen Latifah is out being the equalizer. One of the things I love about this particular character, two things I should point out. Number one, she stretches the boundaries of imagination. Like, wow, this is the Black woman everyone wants to be. But the thing that I love about the series is the practicality of her clothing. We have a Black female police detective who's got on a coat. She's wearing her Doc Martens. She's marching around town. She's not in no teeny tiny high heels. She's not in a tight dress trying to be cute. Sorry, Pam Grier, no offense. Right? She is, I'm sorry. She is who she is, and she is doing the works that she's doing. So the idea of this, this superhero, because I did say she's a little bit, it's a little bit over the top, but the idea of the practicality that she brings to the ideas of women in law enforcement, that she understands that she's going to be accused of stuff, that she's got to just set certain stuff aside and do the job. It's a very, very interesting portrayal. I was telling, I was watching the TV with the family the other night, and I said, she looks like she could get in a fight, no problem. Okay. She doesn't look like maybe she won't fight you. No, she's gonna fight you. You going down. She's the equalizer who you can call when you can't call 911. And I hope you're noticing now in these clips that I've shown you how we have begun to move to a more multicultural sense of agency. And one of the things that's stirring under there is that the law enforcement, as it becomes more multicultural, as it incorporates individuals with different skills who look different, it begins to become a better agency. It begins to become more informed. It begins to serve the people it is supposed to serve, right? That's just my idea. All right, I've got a couple more slides here before I'm gonna be quiet and leave some time for some conversation. Let's go to the next slide, just to wrap things up. So here's who I didn't talk about. Oh, sorry, the future of law enforcement. Oh yeah. And I know that I'm sure there's a colleague out there who can hopefully take this one. Snowpiercer is a series, TNT, it's on the CW, I think, that is a futuristic, problematic, post-apocalyptic world. David Diggs, the gentleman you see in the front of the picture to your right with the dreads, is the officer who they are using to do the investigation because he used to be a police officer before he became the lower classes on this train bound for everywhere in the underworld. Regina King on the left in Watchmen, an extremely successful series in which she is law enforcement, and you will notice that law enforcement is masked and dark and covered. Very interesting kind of ideas about what law enforcement is going to be and how it is going to have to behave to be successful in the future. I'm not going down that road. I just thought I'd share those pictures with you, so you all can think about that. Okay, next slide. Just a little food for thought. So what changed? The full cycle of policing. In the very first clips that we were looking at, we were only looking at arrest and crime. By the time we get to law and order, we're looking at crime, arrest, trial, and now even imprisonment, post-imprisonment, what happens when you come back, and how the community is impacted throughout that process. Previously, in earlier presentations, we would be introduced to the crying mother and the, oh, don't take my baby away, that kind of moment. Now we're seeing how that whole cycle moves forward and the impacts it has, good and bad, on the community, right? The law enforcement changed from the lone Black hero, Sidney Poitier is kind of a lone, he's a loner, Howard Rollins, loner, right, to members of a team. Now we have a team, and notice as we go forward historically, how that team is beginning to be changed culturally. It includes a woman. It includes someone from another culture. It includes various kinds of expertise compared to that, I'm the cop, I've got the gun kind of mentality. The inclusion of gender and ethnicity. And then an interest in how home life and community impact Black law enforcement, especially with the Equalizer, the idea that she has this family that she is being pulled between my obligations to my child, you know, that I love and care for, and my obligations to the community that needs me to solve these problems for them, and how important that tension and the ramping up of that tension is. And one more slide, then. Thank you so much. All right, the struggle continues. Remember I said at the beginning, you are what you eat. So I hope you will leave this presentation and you will begin to question the images that you are seeing out loud, especially with others who watch with you. In a previous conversation about cultural images and presentation, this is one of the things I think we need to do, is to say, man, you know, they dogged him out. Oh, that's unbelievable. You know, I think we have to begin to say those things to change the narrative. That is something you can do, particularly if you watch with younger people. I said younger people because I'm an older people, right? That when you point to, this is a stereotype, or when you say, look at that, all the gang members are Asian again, or look at that, how they got, right? When you start to name things and say them, it does make a difference. It especially makes a difference to our community as we continue these conversations. Secondly, I think you need to limit your exposure to negative or traumatic portrayals of your communities. And there are some series that I didn't deal with because I don't watch them. There's just too much gunplay for me, okay? I'm with you, Andre. I don't need that in my world. So sorry. That also means that maybe you need to let them know, and that's my third point, when they get it right or wrong. I stopped watching your program because I got tired of the depictions of all the women as. I got tired of the fact that every time something went down, one of my people was ending up on the, I got tired of which means if I'm not watching your program, I'm not buying no Jack in the Box, I'm not buying no Comet, I'm not seeing any of those commercials because I'm not watching your program because I don't like what you have to say. And sometimes, you know, it's an email. You can send one. Maybe it does some good. Maybe it doesn't. Just saying. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Let's see.
Are you sticking to that, Kathy? You gonna stick to that?
My story. And again, if I have a colleague, I didn't talk about women in policing. I didn't talk about comic police presentations. I didn't. So, you know, hello, the door's open. Next.
That's great. Kathy, you and Andre have exceeded our expectations. That was really that was precious. That was wonderful. I have dibs because I'm one of the hosts. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions first, and then Stan, our esteemed colleague from the West Side Action Group, whom I did not introduce when we first began, Stan Futch. You all will remember that last name if you don't know Stan in particular, because John Futch his brother John was such a presence on our campus for so many years. And Stan has been sticking with us for over a year now as we have taken this journey to explore policing. But I'm wondering, in the context of what you just said, which was brilliant, what do you think of the real life drama that's going on in the courts right now? You know, I've been following this stuff for many, many years. I have never seen a chief of police get on the stand and talk about one of his officers. Never seen that. Any thoughts on that, you guys?
I watch snippets and bibbits because, you know, as Andre and I are both
traumatizing. It's traumatizing.
Yeah, it's very traumatizing. Yeah. But I do read the paper because I want to know what happened, right? I just can't watch it. And I think it is so interesting, the level of honesty that we are arriving at now. And I wonder if it isn't in part because you know, I'm an artist, so I'm gonna lay it all on our cultural feet, Andre. If it isn't because right now we're in a climate where we are seeing more, certainly not enough, but we are seeing more honest presentations. We see battered women in on television and in films, we see, we have a very different sense than back in the days of Dragnet. Oh, there's a car, there's a cop, and away they went. That was the end of that. You know what I mean? So I can't help but wonder if that, and if that isn't in some ways making the individuals who are testifying feel the truth of the need to speak truth in this moment when, you have an audience. It doesn't have to go under the rug. It doesn't have to be, Andre?
But my response to Mary, Dr. T, thank you for that prompt. I think it's interesting. I think I may have a different perspective, because when you said that, what came to my mind was, although there's transparency, it seems to be coming to light, it doesn't negate the fact that there still may be some smoke and fog. And I'm worried about the smoke and fog when it comes down to the jurors having to make a decision. And is that smoke and fog going to continue to choke us? Are we going to resist it and then have uprisings? Are we going to be able to digest that fog, that nasty, nasty smoke again?
Yeah.
So I can only watch it in bits and pieces as well, like my colleague here. But I need to be informed. But it was very enlightening to see the chief of police say what he said. And I had to watch that. I made myself watch that so that I could center the fact that, okay, there is some kind of truth that should be respected and relied upon. And should be guaranteed that this chief of police is speaking from a space of truth.
Yes. And we have been debating back and forth for the last few months. Does the presence of African Americans change qualitatively or quantitatively policing? Does it really change? And having come from a background, where I was an African American police officer, I guess I was so entrenched in it. I've always come down negatively. No, it's not going to make a difference because it is in the context of white supremacy, a white supremacist run institution and that kind of thing. But I tell you, I'm starting to weaken with that opinion based on just last week. The police officers who are coming out and talking about, and this particular police chief actually sued this a few years ago. He sued the city for discrimination against him and others in the police department. So here you have a man who, usually when you sue the police department, you are on the outside. You are never getting back in. And he not only got back in, but he is now the chief of police. And so I'm totally encouraged now. I mean, because before I was like, oh man, what's it going to take? It's not just the personnel, but it has to, but he is the authority. He is the authority figure.
And as the examples that I selected, it makes a difference. It makes a difference to the Black community or the brown community or the Asian community. When the officer, you mentioned Officer Friendly at the beginning. If Officer Friendly looked like you, that's different, right? If Officer Friendly really looked like, oh, okay, right? Or if Officer Friendly is somebody.
That was the dynamic for me, because in Northeast DC, in the Black elementary school that I went to, my teachers were Black, my peers were Black, and the officer was Black. But the previous year, I saw this film that was not with Black officers. So I've been struck, and I look at myself, and not to boast, but I am the embodiment of the Voting Rights Act onward. I was born in 1964. So I feel the heaviness of what the community and society is going through during the time of my life.
Sure, absolutely.
So you never saw the water fountains or the segregated theaters or anything like that?
Only in images, but not in real life.
Only in images, but you never experienced that.
Never experienced that part. My mother and my grandmother did, so I got that information. But living in DC was a little different. And when we went to visit our family in Virginia, we would just go see Aunt Mary's house, Uncle June, Uncle Julia's. We wouldn't go into town.
Yes.
We would just go to the family house.
And Black families learned how to protect their children from that. I mean, Kathy was raised in Detroit, but I'm sure you traveled down south at one time or other, and as did I. And it was a real heavy effort on the part of our parents to protect us from,
and to
from
make
that.
sure that they, what's the PBS special on Driving While Black that talks about
Yes,
driving those
yeah,
roads? Because it
yeah,
had never occurred to me. I thought my father was just being crazy when he would
yeah,
drive so far
yeah,
before he
yeah,
would stop to go to the bathroom.
yeah. No,
No,
But I gotta say that Mary's got a point there, because we over doing this series for so long. One of the things we have learned is the Black officers, like in Cotton Comes to Harlem, the Black officers were harder on the Black people than white officers were. And so there is that question as if you're Black, a Black officer, do you make a difference? And like Andre, I had a Black officer that was the father of somebody I went to high school with, and he would come over and grab you, and he'd tell you, pour your beer out, and I'm taking you home to your mama, because he knew your mama would do you more damage than he could. But the truth of the matter is the Black officers in where I grew up were tougher on the Blacks than the white officers were.
Sometimes, absolutely, because they have to impress the white officers. They have to impress the people who are going to be promoting them, giving them good assignments, etc. So you're torn. Do you bleed blue or do you bleed black? Or do you which community do you identify with? And every Black officer is tested. Every Latino officer is tested in terms of how do you see the community as humans? And I think you even hinted at that one time, Kathy, to give us more, make us more three-dimensional. Are we human, or are we, just this big blob of crime? And I think Black officers don't see us that way. They definitely don't. But if you're not familiar with the community,
this is why I would challenge my colleagues to take a look at what else is going on. Because remember, I said this is a curated view of, I can't watch all TV. I can only watch some, right? Yeah. But if you, a show like FBI, right now there's a Black female officer who is really torn between what the community thinks of her because she's a member of the FBI, and the fact that she got in the FBI to make a difference. And in a recent episode, she confronted the police. The police and the FBI apparently don't entirely get along all the time. But she confronted the police because they were surveilling an area and weren't surveilling the white supremacists, were only surveilling surveilling the Black activists. And she confronted them about that and said, if it's surveillance, it's everything. It's not you being selective about cherry picking this group and this, because the person they were looking for was a white supremacist.
So she had a harder time this week, Professor Ervin. She had a harder time this week because this week she actually challenged a police officer that she knew the family and had grown up with the daughter, and she was trying to protect him, and they were challenging her to go after him because they thought he was involved. And so it made it even harder for her this week. And I gotta say, all your selections were perfect, because that's what I watch all of them. I watch all of them. So I was just amazed, especially when you put the Equalizer. I said, no, she didn't. She went to the Equalizer. I love that show because right now it's good. But like you said, I don't want them to get into mushy and family. I don't want them to, don't dilute it.
Yeah.
So I have a question, if I may jump in and just ask a question that's contradictory to the questions that have been presented already. I'm curious to how and why do we find this kind of material entertaining? What does that do to our humanity? How does that speak to our humanity that this level of presentation, we find it entertaining? We use our cash, we get popcorn and snacks, we get comfortable, and we are entertained by these images. That's what messes with me sometimes. I can't.
I'll say this. When I was a little kid, my brother and I were so obsessed with gangster movies.
Wow.
And we would spend hours watching gangster movies on TV, and same thing, popcorn, soda pop, and we'd watch these gangster movies. Well, then when cop movies came in, you weren't seeing all these bad guys get away with it. You were starting to see the good guys arrest the bad guys. And so that kind of changed the way things are done. And so over the years, the reason why I enjoy the cop movies is two things. One is people's lives are worse than mine. That's just a fact.
Wow.
If you watch those 1 hour shows, then people are in trouble. I think I have it bad, but I don't have it bad at all because I'm not in that mess. But the second thing, and we touched on it, and the old movies, one of the things that I picked up on all those clips that you showed is that in all of them, some Black character was criticizing another Black character about not being assimilated into the white dream.
Mm-hmm.
Soldier Story was definitely that way.
Okay.
He hated Geechees. He didn't like the Geechee man, you know, and he talked about the guy in Paris that had ran around with a tail, you know, but all the old, and even in the heat of the night, this cop from up north comes down, and the white woman whose husband brought a northern business down to the south, and she said, I don't want that Black man off the case. Well, see, she was used to dealing with Black people in authority, and so she accepted that. But the truth of the matter is it was, this Black guy is too white for this community, and we need to get rid of him. And so as you watch the movies develop, like you're so right. What's happened now is, one, they're getting more personal, they're getting more human. And I like that part of it.
Okay.
What I don't like is when they get too personal.
Yeah.
In other words, when it's the daughter who's going to jail, and then all of a sudden the daughter's my case. I don't want that. I want you to keep doing what you're doing, and make it exciting. But I think we're excited about cop movies because, one, the quality of them is pretty good. Especially this, the Equalizer. I'm impressed with the Equalizer, how quality it is, and it's just an action thing. It's not true entertainment.
It's not groundbreaking, except that it's Queen Latifah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And you guys have just given me another reason to fill up my days and nights with, you know, I'm having to add 2 or 3 more, and I have got to see Cotton Comes to Harlem again. I haven't seen it in many years, and it was, and I don't think you said, Kathy, that it was funny. It was a cop show that was serious, or cop movies like Chester Himes. You know, he was a funny. You know, he added a lot of humor into his books. But I was going to say it goes back even further, Stan, with you know, the first crime writer was really Edgar Allan Poe, who, you know, wrote short stories about, you know, this fictional detective, and then, you know, the pulp novels, the pulp fiction novels all had, and people saw that crime it sold.
But
you know, that's my question. That's my question.
It sells.
It sells.
But beyond that, in many of the films and TV shows that I was looking at, there is justice. The criminal gets caught.
Okay.
You pay for, you know, and sometimes you don't pay inside the system. Sometimes you pay outside the system.
Yeah.
You know, something bad happens to you.
Yes.
Otherwise,
Right.
But it typically, in the end, there is this feeling of, you know, that somebody is going to be in charge of making things right.
Right.
In crime dramas, it's the police, law enforcement, etc. But you know, and that's, as audience members, we like that.
We do. We love that excitement. We even
Andre,
love the shooting. We even love the shooting.
Yeah, and Andre, and the truth of the matter is,
that's what I found
is solved in an hour.
Okay.
You know, we watch these
Yeah,
shows, and
it's
like
all
Andre
solved.
says, why are we so intrigued with this? Because the truth of the matter is, everybody knows that the case isn't closed in an hour.
Whoa.
Yeah.
We found the evidence.
Not even the show 48 Hours can close a case in 48 hours.
I know.
And you know, I'm going to admit, I enjoyed Shaft, the updated version. And I couldn't believe why, because I wrote a note, because I remember when you played it, Kathy, it was 1971, but it hit our neighborhood in 72, 73. Now, Miss Davis's daughter, Peaches, took us, the other kids in the house, one summer afternoon when Miss Davis wasn't aware of it, and got some cash and took us to the movies. We thought we were going to go see some kiddie show. I'm in there like 7, 8 years old watching Shaft. And I'm going, this is crazy. What is going on? Why am I watching Shaft? But Peaches was 13, 14, and she wanted to watch Shaft.
Sophisticated.
Yes.
She knew it. She knew it. You know, we're gonna have to have a 1.0 version of this later on, because this is such a great conversation. But I think there's that first question, Stan, that we should probably get to before we leave.
Let me see. What's the first
the very first one, where they're asking for a
transcript,
a transcript or the PowerPoint.
Well, all of these presentations are recorded, right?
Yes, we are going to be recorded.
So there you are.
Yeah,
I'm not sure
I'm going to give you my. I'm not sure I'm going to give you my PowerPoint. Reach out to me.
No. I mean, this we'll have it on. We'll have it on
the library
on film. Yes, yeah. And we're starting. We just got the word today that we're starting to post a lot of our shows, our presentations online. So they'll be definitely available. I will let my students know about them. But
there is a wonderful volume. Donald Bogle has written Blacks on Film and Television. Is the sort of encyclopedia that is one of my favorite references, and has written several other books. And there are a few other sort of historical overviews of Blacks on film and television. I know there are some young people who are part of this conversation, and let me encourage you to think about this as an area of research, because right now we're in a period where there is a wealth of, I picked programs that I watch and know. I don't watch everything, right? Yeah. I didn't do The Wire. I didn't do Bad Boys. I didn't do The Watchmen. So you could take any one of those series and start to look at who are the Black characters, how are they being presented, what is the world we're being introduced to, what are we the viewers, not only the surface presentation of law enforcement, but particularly when Black or actors of any color are involved, what is the subversive message that they are sending to us? Because Black actors say, "Oh yes, I'm a Black character in this, but I'm a Black character in this." Right,
Professor Ervin, you answered the next question: is are there more examples of films in the past 30 years? And you mentioned that in the beginning, and that is, there's so many more.
Yeah, most of them, by the way, are bad. We have to say that most of them are bad, but I think the ones that you gave, Kathy, the examples that you and Andre gave for what we're talking about were excellent. I mean, to go in and I know Michaud started filming in what, 1920s or something.
Yep. Oscar Michaud, yeah.
But to see an all-Black cast, see an all-Black cast. And to see that these folks had agency, that they had power in these relationships they had. It's just pretty groundbreaking, I think. Yeah. So are there any other questions, Stan, or should we sign off?
There are no other questions. And for me, one thing I did want to say is pride and decency was mentioned in one of the films, and it was always pride and decency referring to somebody white. It's like Black folks don't have no pride or decency. So it's like, let's call that young boy. He says he has pride and decency.
Oh, that was straight Intruder in the Dust.
Yeah. So that always got me is I never heard that on the other side,
Yeah.
And then also on Law and Order, I want to say this. I was really saddened when Jesse, what's his last name?
Martin
left the show the way he left the show. That was sad to me. And then the black lawyer in the early days, the way he left the show, he actually left and went on the other side, and he came back and did some presentations, but we were losing the blacks on the show poorly.
Yeah.
And that bothered me. And you're right. One of the things that we don't do is speak up when we think something's wrong. In other words, if you don't talk about cop movies, you talk about movies, period, Alien, the biggest and the baddest guy in the movie was a black guy, and he's dead. He's died saving the weakest person in the movie. And I'm like, and that used to be who did it? Townsend did
Robert Townsend.
Robert Townsend did
Hollywood
a thing
Shuffle?
on what was it called?
Hollywood Shuffle.
Shuffle, something Hollywood Shuffle.
Hollywood Shuffle.
And it was so to point. But you know what? After he did that, and it was a long time ago. After he did that, you would think Hollywood would change, but it didn't. He held him to the fire. He put him right out there and said, "This is what you're doing." And then one of the things is that black enough for you? We heard that a lot during the movies, cop movies, regular movies. And that was one of the things that black actors, I felt sorry for them because they had to be black.
Yeah.
But Sidney wouldn't step to that. He would not step to that. So
no.
Got to give him props for that.
I like I said before, I hate to end this conversation, but we did promise our guests that we were going to let them go at 5 o'clock. And
thank you so
we
much.
Appreciate it. And the checks are in the mail. Just want you to know that the checks are in the mail.
You know what? It better not be no McDonald's money either. It better be real cash.
Well, you can't
Monopoly. We deal with Monopoly money.
But we only have a few topics that we only have a few more weeks before the semester is over, and we're still kind of talking about summer, but we would certainly encourage our audience to tune in for the next few weeks, because we got some hot topics coming up.
All right.
So thank you very much,
for being here.
Professors
Wonderful presentation.
Ervin and Harrington. We appreciate you so much.